So rewind real quick back to the game on Saturday where an undefeated Calgary team comes into Seattle. The Kraken come back to force overtime and hand them their first loss of the season. Now, a few days later, an undefeated Winnipeg team comes into Seattle. The Kraken do end up falling behind, come back, force overtime, and so close. So close to repeating what they did on Saturday. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Kraken, if you had told me that they were going to get a point out of this game against Winnipeg going in, I would have been happy with it, but it still feels bittersweet as they lose 4-3 in overtime to the still undefeated Winnipeg Jets. And this game really was a roller coaster, which just adds to something that I've been feeling about this team all season, that win or lose, rain or shine, which they play indoors at night, so the last part doesn't matter as much, but win or lose, this team has been very fun to watch so far this season. Maybe aside from the game in Dallas that was a little bit dull, especially since the Kraken never scored. But for the most part, this team has been a very fun one to watch, and it never really feels like they're out of a game. Or at least it's getting to that point anyway. There is still some residual feelings and expectations as games go along left over from last season. And I won't lie, when the Kraken went down 3-0 in the third of this game, especially with how hard the Jets and Hellebuck especially has been to score on this season, I didn't know how likely it was the Kraken were going to come back, but they had played very well throughout the game to that point, so it still didn't feel like it was completely over and there was at least a chance, which is already an improvement over especially the end of last season, where by the end of last season, if they got down 2 goals really at any point in the game, you knew it was pretty much over. They were going to end up losing that game. Really, the only reason to believe that they might come back was because they had yet to come back from a multi-goal deficit to win a game, and you felt like it had to happen at some point, but it never did. So, yeah, this team already proving that they are certainly better in some ways, especially offensively, than last season, and that is even with the recent offensive struggles that lasted until halfway through the third period of this game. Though even with that being said, while the finishing aspect of things offensively is yet to really show consistency, back-to-back games are 2 games where they score 13 goals, and then the next 2 games they score 4, with 2 of those on a 2-man advantage. They have, at least during large chunks of every game so far this season, again, maybe with the exception of the game in Dallas, really played fast and created momentum, created offensive chances. They just haven't necessarily always gotten them to find the net. And even beyond all that, if you're, let's say, less invested in the outcomes of the games and just want to be entertained and see good, fun to watch hockey, well, the Kraken have been providing that pretty much all season long. It's been fast-paced, close games, even if it's not always high-scoring. Out of their 8 games so far, 5 have been decided by 1 goal, another 2 by 2 goals, and the only game that the Kraken had decided by more than 2 goals was the one that they won 7-3 in Nashville. So, yeah, this team has been entertaining at the very least. Anyway, all of which is to say that while the outcome of this game, again, was a little bit bittersweet, because while the Kraken did have that great comeback to tie things, they end up losing it in overtime in a bit of an anticlimactic final goal of the game, especially where, yeah, you get the point out of Winnipeg, which, to be fair, not a lot of teams have done this season, and nobody's gotten 2 points out of them, and you had the great comeback to get that point in the first place. But all the momentum, all the energy, and especially with the recent memory of what the Kraken did to the Flames, it really felt like they were going to be able to pull it off, so then to have that ripped out from under you doesn't feel great. I don't know, maybe you feel differently, let me know down in the comments, but I suppose we should probably get into the specifics of how this roller coaster of a game ended up playing out and how we got to that final score of a 4-3 overtime loss for the Kraken. It starts out with another great first period. In a lot of ways, this game progressed similarly to that game against the Avalanche. The Kraken play a pretty dominant first period, getting the vast majority of the chances and spending a lot more time with the puck than the Jets did. Now, I'd say the Jets probably had a little bit more go their way in the first period than the Avalanche did on Tuesday. But importantly, they didn't get the one thing that the Avalanche got to go their way in that game, and that is that the Jets didn't manage to score. Meanwhile, the Kraken do manage to score halfway through the first period. It's the first line out on the ice, which looks different from how it has recently. The Kraken coming into this game, switching up all of the lines, and I'd get more into the specifics of that and how I felt about the switches had they lasted throughout the game. The only one that did last and stuck, and I think will for at least the next few games, was Matty Beniers moving back up to the first line with Eberle and McCann on either side of him, taking the spot that Shane Wright had been in for a while. And that is the line that gets the Kraken on the board first. As McCann, it's a bit of a disjointed, fumbly play to get into the offensive end, but McCann gets the puck into the offensive end. Eberle might have touched it at some point. Anyway, it's kind of whacked around by both teams around the blue line. Eventually, it ends up on Benier's stick with some open space. He skates up to the side of the slot around by the faceoff circle, fires off a shot, and places it absolutely perfectly in the tiny little hole that Hellebuck left in the top corner. Hits, I don't know if it hit the post or maybe just the inside of the top of the cage. Bounces around in there, comes out, but it had gone all the way across the line. Beniers picks up his first of the season, and the Kraken lead the game 1-0. Then almost right off the ensuing faceoff, the Kraken get a power play with a chance to take a multi-goal lead, and they nearly do. It was a pretty good power play, all things considered. They got a couple of good chances, one good scoring chance during the power play, but they aren't able to extend the lead. And while they do maintain momentum, I'd say, throughout the rest of the period, they are not able to get another one past Hellebuck. So we go to a second period where, again, you're feeling good going into the second period, but especially after how things went on Tuesday, there's a little bit of, can they prevent that same bounce back for the opposing team from happening again? And spoiler alert, at least to start things out, no, they couldn't. As the Jets come out with, something to prove, I guess. I mean, it's obviously a very good Jets team coming into this game, 6-0. You knew the Kraken weren't going to keep them hemmed in the entire game, but you'd like them to not get that much immediate momentum right out of the gates in the second. And while Joey makes a couple of absolutely spectacular saves within the first couple of minutes, I mean, the first one is absolutely insane. It's a crossing pass from one side to the other for a wide open, I want to say Pionk gets this shot off from close to the net on a east to west pass, and Decord is able to dive back, pad and glove, and gets his glove on it. Isn't able to quite catch it in the glove though, so it leaks out to the side after an incredible sprawling diving split save. Pionk gets the puck back and then tries to get a second shot off, or I think he actually passed it up into the slot for a rebound shot or a follow-up shot. Decord is still able to scramble to his feet and get in front of that one to prevent that from going in, and then is able to freeze the puck. So one absolute highlight reel save, and then another pretty good save to follow that one up. He keeps the Kraken ahead, but within a minute of that sequence, the Jets do end up on the board, and it's the type of goal that, let's just say it's the type of goal that happens to teams like the Jets when things are going the way that they are for the Jets right now. When you're hot, you're hot. And when you're hot, the puck tends to bounce your way. It comes off a shot from ex-Kraken, Mason Appleton, and it's off to the blocker side of Decord, so he has no chance to catch it and get a freeze. So instead, he does what is absolutely the right thing and plays it perfectly by blocking it aside and sending what would have been then the rebound out into the corner where there's no chance for a rebound shot to end up in the net, a non-dangerous part of the ice. Unfortunately, what Decord can't see as he's making that save and redirecting the puck away from the net is that Niederreiter had just barely gotten around Montour, who was on the end of a very long shift in desperate need of a change, but with it being the second period and the bench being farther away, he had not been able to get one, so Niederreiter just gets around Montour. The puck goes off of Decord's pad into Niederreiter's chest and then just kind of fumbles around as he approaches the net and falls out of him into the goal to even things up for the Jets. And while Decord was not very happy about it in the moment, went right to the official and pleaded with him and tried to tell him that Niederreiter had thrown the puck into the net, which then would have disallowed the goal. You can't use your hand to put the puck in the net. Unfortunately, while the Kraken tried, as Bilesma said after the game, tried to find some excuse to challenge this, to try to bring it off the board, they didn't see anything. And, well, I can understand the frustration of the fans in the building, and I don't know if it was equally frustrating at home. I do think the right call was made here. Niederreiter, I don't know if he ever really even touches it with his hand, and he certainly didn't have it in his hand when when it goes into the net. There was no hand pass into the net, which is what would have disallowed the goal. It just kind of is one of those unfortunate, incredibly lucky bounces for the Jets. It just goes into his chest and then gets carried into the net as he slows down as he comes into the crease. It's not goaltender interference. I saw some people talking about that on different social media places. It was no contact with the goaltender, and as long as there's no contact with the goaltender, it doesn't matter if the opposing player is in the crease. He's welcome to be in the crease as long as he doesn't prevent the goaltender from moving around to try and make a save. That didn't happen here. It doesn't go off his hand and into the net, so unfortunately, while it is a bit awkward and lucky for the Jets and frustrating for those reasons, it is a good goal, and that's just what it is. And unfortunately for the Kraken, as well as the frustration levels for at least the portion of the fan base that was in the building, though I think it's pretty safe to say that it would have stretched to the fans at home as well, things only get worse and certainly more frustrating when a couple minutes later, it's the Kraken who get a great rush chance down towards the Winnipeg end of the ice. And it's a pretty little passing play, too, between especially Larson and Bjorkstrand, as Bjorkstrand gets it into the offensive end, then drops it for Larson, who's following him in. Larson, instead of taking a shot, fires it back to the far side, where Bjorkstrand has gotten to the backside of the net, fires off a shot to a half-empty net, and buries it to give the Kraken back the lead. But it gets almost immediately challenged by Winnipeg for goaltender interference, and while I don't think that it had an impact on the outcome of the play, I think where the shot comes from, the Kraken just had Hellebuck beat here. This goal's probably happening either way. Unfortunately, there is goaltender interference as Gord has his skate in the crease when Hellebuck tries to get to the other side for the Bjorkstrand shot. So upon further review, it gets called back. No goal for the Kraken. They do not take back the lead. It is goaltender interference. And the fans are understandably displeased. And I'll admit, it was a bit borderline and hard to see without the clear replay, which I don't even know if they showed it in the arena. They might have showed it once. Either way, it's not like the fans are going to go, oh, okay, yeah, you're right, ref. Yep, you got this one. No, it's lots of pretty loud boos. Fans, especially after what I think they, going off of Decord's reaction, probably thought wasn't a goal at the other end of the ice. Now this one gets called back. And while, like I said, I don't really think that it had an impact on how the play would have turned out, I just don't think, even for how good of a goaltender he is and how hot he has been at the start of the season, I don't think Hellebuck really had a chance to get back in time to save this shot from Bjorkstrand. Unfortunately, at least in this case anyway, that's just not how goaltender interference works. It doesn't matter if the goaltender would have gotten back to make the save. All that matters is that there was contact with an opposing player who was in the crease that prevented the goaltender from having a chance to potentially get to where he needed to be to have a chance to make the save, and I do think that happened here. So as much as I hate to say it, well, both calls were close, and both calls went against the Kraken. I do think both of these were officiated properly. The right call in the end was made, so if there are any fans still out there for the Kraken that are feeling like the Kraken got robbed by the officials in this game, I don't think they really did. If you wanted to see the officials rob a team of a chance to win a game, then you could have watched the Thursday Night Football game. Sorry, Vikings fans, who did absolutely get robbed of a chance by a horrible call. As far as this Kraken game, though, yeah, well, both are borderline. The right call certainly was made in both cases, and the Jets just happened to get fortunate in both cases with a lucky bounce, and then some fairly minor contact that, while it is goaltender interference by the way the rule is written, it probably would not have made a difference in whether or not Bjorkstrand was going to score. Anyway, regardless of how anybody felt about those calls in the moment, or still feels about them now, regardless of how frustrating those few minutes of gameplay were from especially a Kraken perspective, and it definitely seemed to stick around for the rest of the game as far as the frustration in the building, as the officials got a healthy booing. I mean, officials rarely get a warm welcome, but they got a healthy booing as they exited the ice to end the second period, and then as they entered on the third, and then another pretty loud boo as they exited the ice at the end of the game. So The fans continued to voice their displeasure as the rest of the night went along. The Kraken, though, he just got to regroup and try to not allow that frustration to set in on the bench and affect the rest of the game. And I gotta say, as far as the team's part in all this, while they too could have had every reason to feel frustrated, even if they don't necessarily think that they were bad calls, having been on the ice and seeing probably the replays on the bench, just at the circumstances around them, to have the game tied up off of an incredibly lucky bounce, and then to have the goal that you really probably would have scored either way taken off of the board. They really don't let it affect them at all. They continue to maintain the momentum after that overturned goal. Unfortunately, it just doesn't turn into anything more for them. And then as the Jets start to even things out, they get the Kraken stuck in their end of the ice for just long enough to have it's a bit of a lazy play at the end of a long shift from Bjorkstrand at the blue line that sees him not able to clear the puck all the way across the line. So Kyle Connor is then able to chip the puck off of the blue line right as it's about to cross, so the Kraken get that close to clearing the zone. But he keeps the Jets onside by getting it down to Scheifele down by the faceoff circle. Scheifele then quickly finds a wide open Velarde next to the net. And as the Kraken come to challenge him, Velarde is able to wrap it from one side of the net in front. He doesn't go around the back, but goes from one side of Decord all the way around to the other and is just able to wrap it around his toe as he gets to the post. Decord does get a piece of it, but ends up kind of just kicking it into the corner of the net, and the Jets do end up taking the 2-1 lead. Now the Kraken do get a chance almost immediately off the ensuing faceoff with the power play to even things back up. They really only get, I think, one chance on that power play. The rest of it's killed off pretty effectively by a Jets team that's been pretty good on the kill so far this season. I mean, they're undefeated and have been very good at keeping the puck out of their net in general, so it probably goes without saying that they've been one of the best teams on the kill. Still, they're able to kill that one off and get to the second intermission with that 2-1 lead. A second period that I would say, as a whole, went better for the Kraken than the one against the Avalanche. But either way, they find themselves trailing going into the third period once again. And then the third period gets off to basically the same start that the second period got off to, only this time with the aid of a power play for the Jets, which the fans were not terribly happy about, but at this point they were ready to boo the officials for any possible reason that they gave them, so I'm not going to quibble with the call too much, especially because I think it was a fair one. But the Jets get the power play, get a few chances on it. It's generally a pretty good power play for the Jets. The Kraken still able to kill it off with a couple good saves from Decord. Nothing great like the one he had to start out the second period. And then right as the power play comes to an end, I mean, within a couple of seconds of the fifth player getting back out on the ice for the Kraken, Decord comes out of his net a little bit to challenge a shot from Niederreiter that, well, let's just say the replay is not kind to Decord here, as he comes out of his net, out of the crease even, to challenge a potential shot from Niederreiter as he gets a pass from down in the corner up to the face-off dot, and he's got three Kraken players around him, so I don't really know that Decord had to come as far out as he did to take away the angle, especially with two defensemen between Niederreiter and him. And then Niederreiter's handling the puck back and forth, as anybody does in the offensive end, as he's looking for a shot. And because of that, I think Decord assumes that Niederreiter's gonna shoot it through the screen at some point, so he goes to the ice to take away the 5-hole option on a potential shot. Unfortunately, what that does, though, is Niederreiter does not end up shooting, and it pretty much keeps Decord out of the net, way out of position, so then when Niederreiter takes it to the middle of the ice, he has a completely empty net to put it into. It's an easy goal for Niederreiter, his second of the game, and now it's a 2-goal deficit for the Kraken, still early on, but in the third period, against, to this point in the season, the stingiest team in the NHL when it comes to giving up goals, and a goaltender who, if the Vezina was decided right now, would win it without any question whatsoever. So then it is at this point that, like I said back in the beginning, if this was last year's Kraken team, especially towards the end of the season when we kind of already knew what to expect from them when it came to multiple goal deficits, especially in the third period, though honestly at any point in the game, especially with an opponent as stingy as the Jets have been to this point in the season, you would have known that the game was already over. There's no chance the Kraken are coming back. At best, maybe they get a late goal, so you get to see one more goal, but they're not going to win it, or probably even force overtime. But with this year's Kraken, at least so far anyway, they've definitely shown a little bit more fight back than we saw from last year's team. Certainly offensively, they're able to get things moving north and south quite a bit faster and keep the game moving, create those offensive chances, and heck, we've already seen them come back from one multiple goal deficit to end up winning a game. Now sure, that one against the Wild, they went down 2 goals early on in the second, so there's a little bit more time to come back, and the opponent this time is a little bit more difficult to score goals on, but you still have hope, and especially with how they played the first period and even the back half of the second, there's good reason to think that the Kraken have the ability to come back and make a game of this. And sure enough, that's just what they're able to do, though it does take until the back half of the third. And at this point, they, well, not only had gone back to the original lines that we've kind of been used to, with the one key exception of Matty Beniers staying with Eberle and McCann, and right then taking over Benier's spot on that line. Otherwise, the other lines had kind of gone back to what we'd been used to and abandoned the new lines that they had started the game with. But it turns out that the rest of the lines didn't really end up mattering, other than giving that first line a rest on the bench from time to time, as they really did get the lion's share of the time on the ice, in especially the back half of this third period, as the Kraken were pressing to try and get that goal. One of the first times I can really remember where the Kraken really leaned into one line being the one that they thought had a chance to get them back into a game. This has usually been a team that does try to win by committee, and there's no one line that's dominating play time at any point, especially like you would see, I mean, to use an extreme example, like a Draisaitl and McDavid line. When the Oilers are down in a third period, you'll just see the two of them with a third guy out on the ice for almost the entire third period, and that was kind of close to what we saw with the Beniers, McCann, Eberle line, especially in the back half of the third here. And wouldn't you know it, it ended up working out. And it all starts with about 9 minutes left in the game, as Beniers makes a nice play along the boards to keep the puck in the offensive end, fighting it away from a couple of Jets players. Eventually it ends up on the stick of McCann up by the blue line. He finds a wide open Eberle all alone on the far side of the offensive end. Eberle's able to collect the puck on his forehand, but with his back to the net. Of course, what we all know after having watched Eberle now for a few years is that he can be pretty dangerous with the puck on his stick, some space, and his back to the opposing net. And now the Jets know too, as Eberle backs his way up to the net, handling it on his backhand, and then just chips it through the armpit of Hellebuck and into the net to give him his 6th in 8 games to start the season, and get the Kraken back to within 1, with the assists going to Beniers and McCann. And with no reason to take this one off the board, that definitely brings the already fairly riled up crowd back into the game. The Kraken back to within 1, so an odd bounce or maybe an odd man advantage with a 6-on-5 at the end of the game, you can potentially still force overtime. Of course, as I've said a few times now, against this Jets team at the moment, especially with how Hellebuck's playing and the fact that he'd only allowed 3 goals to one team so far in 5 previous starts coming into this game, getting one more past him and getting that third one past him was going to be a tough ask, even with still 9 minutes left to do so. But as it turns out, it wouldn't take 9 minutes or even an extra skater, though the Kraken were probably getting pretty close to pulling to cord for that extra guy out on the ice. Once again, it's the Beniers line out there. This time, though, it's McCann keeping the puck along the boards in the offensive end with a great play. I think 3 Jets around him that he's fighting this puck away from. So with incredible determination, McCann's able to keep it in, this time eventually getting up to Montour up by the blue line, who winds up, fires off the shot, tipped in front, and it's in to tie the game at 3. Matty Beniers with the clutch tip, just barely getting it past the pad into the near side of the net past Hellebuck to give Beniers his 2nd of the game, 2nd of the season, and bring the Kraken all the way back. Well, all the way, it's just 2 down, but 2 feels like a pretty big distance to come back against this Jets team the way that they're playing right now, especially to do so in less than a full period. Heck, they did it actually in less than 6 minutes. And then no one scores for the last 3.5. A couple of chances either way, but nothing terribly dangerous. So we do go to overtime, which the Kraken to this point had been perfect. Well, I guess one of them took the shootout, but they'd won once in overtime against an undefeated team at home after coming back to force that overtime. And then they won their first game of the season in the shootout after not scoring in overtime. Either way, we head to overtime, where the Kraken do start with the puck. They get one chance towards the net as Montour drives, and we've already seen Montour start a scoring play to end it in overtime once with Eberle on the ice. This time, It doesn't end up working as Hellebuck doesn't allow much of a rebound. He's able to clear it out. The Jets take possession and never give it up, eventually getting into the Kraken end of the ice where Pionk gets tripped, which allows Hellebuck to get off the ice for the extra skater on the delayed penalty call. It's that extra skater who comes onto the ice in Ehlers. He gets the puck, fires off a shot, which Decord does get a piece of, but it leaks through his armpit, and I don't know if his stick headed in or if it just trickled through and barely slid across the line. Either way, I suppose it hardly matters, as it does leak through Decord and trickle across the goal line to give the Jets the 4-3 overtime victory. Again, a very much bittersweet ending, as the Kraken have that exciting late third period 2-goal comeback against this Jets team that, if you watch my power rankings, I had ranked number 1, obviously, as the last undefeated team in the league. I don't think that was a surprise to anybody that they were ranked number 1. Also against a goaltender in Hellebuck that had only given up 3 goals in 1 previous start so far, now 6 starts on the season. And yeah, that was to the Sharks, but at the same time, he didn't really have to be on the best of his game in that one, since the Jets scored 8 back the other way. So this is probably the best scoring effort that any team has had against the Jets so far this season. Yeah, I don't know. It's bittersweet, obviously, with all that momentum, all the excitement in the building, especially after what the Kraken had done to Calgary on Saturday. It felt like they were going to be able to pull it off, and that's probably what makes this sting so bad. At the same time, they do get a point out of the Jets and show that fight and come back just to be able to get that 1 point and force overtime in the first place. Something that, quite frankly, we just did not see much of last season, and we've already seen it on a number of occasions so far early on this season. And beyond that, to be honest, for those of us that like to look more on the optimistic end of things, or maybe you can call it to get an extra whiff of the copium, this is a game that the Kraken forced overtime after a couple of pretty unfortunate plays there midway through the second. Again, one with that very unlucky, or lucky for the Jets, bounce of a save by Decord turns into a puck in Niederreiter's chest and then just kind of dribbles off of him into the net, somehow avoiding making it look like an illegal hand pass into the net. And then the minor contact that still is technically goaltender interference that probably didn't affect the play, or at least the outcome of the play, but does end up taking a goal off the board for the Kraken. If either one of those doesn't end up happening, the small contact between Gord and Hellebuck that was in the crease and was goaltender interference, I'm not trying to say it wasn't, but if either that contact doesn't happen or the rebound doesn't somehow luckily go off Niederreiter into the net, the Kraken win this game in regulation. I mean, obviously the game probably plays out a little bit different. If one of those things changes in the second period, the third probably plays out differently, but if you just isolate it, there are definitely some paths that you can say the Kraken played well enough to beat the current best team in the NHL. And even aside from that, considering they've played some of the best teams in the NHL to this point in the season and have yet to lose by more than 2 goals and have only lost by 2 in the one game against Dallas on the second half of a back-to-back, missing Vince Dunn. Yeah, I think it's been a pretty solid start to the season for the Kraken. Obviously, already 9 points in 8 games is decent. You probably need a little bit more of a points percentage than that to make the playoffs at the end of the year, but the schedule has not been favorable to the Kraken through the first month and will continue to be a lot of playoff teams from last year over the next couple of weeks until we get to late November, where they get things lighten up a little bit. They have a stretch of back-to-back games against the Ducks into back-to-back games against the Sharks. So yeah, the Kraken have been holding their own against some very good teams and getting more than a point per game out of it in the standings. So I don't know. I guess really the only thing, all things considered at this point, that I feel like you can be nervous about with this team, aside from the health of Vince Dunn, which certainly is a concern, would be the offensive output, especially without Dunn. Defensively, I think they've shored things up pretty well. There's obviously going to still be a mistake here and there, and probably a game here and there throughout the season where things don't come together great defensively. That's just going to happen in an 82-game season. But it certainly looks a lot better and has looked a lot better over really the last few games from the first couple of games of the season, where defensively things were a bit of an adventure. Yeah, the Kraken have been a lot better in that end of the ice, even though they scored just the 3 goals in this game, so it's not like they're back to scoring 6 or 7 like the couple of games at the end of the road trip and the start of this homestand. it still is 3 goals against a very good team. And offensively, yeah, they could have scored 5 or 6 against a lot of other teams around the league with the same play that they had in this game. And especially if that Beniers line with Eberle and McCann continues to play the way, anywhere near the way that they did in this game, especially the third period of this game, that's going to be a fun line to watch, and we could definitely see that bounce back season from Beniers that we're all hoping to see. And you know what? Since this has probably already gone on long enough, and I've been repeating myself, I'm starting to ramble, it's getting pretty late here as I'm recording this. We might as well use that to get us to the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon if you want to help decide the 3 stars. Not that I felt like it was too difficult in this particular one, but if you want to support the channel a little bit more than you already are at the very least, and help decide the Kraken 3 stars among some other perks as the season goes along, you can help support through the link down below to Patreon. And with the 3 stars in this one, like I said, I feel like it was pretty clear Patreon agreed that it's just that first line. And even among them, I feel like it's pretty obvious who goes where. The first star, clearly Beniers with 2 goals and an assist, his first 2 goals of the season, plus the assist on the Eberle goal. The second star, McCann with 2 assists, and also that key play along the boards to set up that last goal that tied the game late in the third. And then the third star, Eberle, only gets the 1 goal, no assists for Eberle, but again, 6 goals in 8 games. He has been a key part of the scoring the Kraken have gotten to this point in the season, and it was an absolute beauty of a backhand chip through Hellebuck. So, yeah, you know he's good for a couple of those pretty looking backhand shots throughout the course of the year, and we got one of them right here. As always though, let me know down in the comment section if you disagree, have just general other thoughts on the game, some other players you want to throw into the mix there. I think Decord probably would be worthy. Montour gets an assist, and I think Evans had a pretty good game as well. He got to have some time up with Montour on that first pairing, I guess it would be now. And then Larson's mixed in. Yeah, without Dunn, they're still kind of figuring out things on the defensive end and trying out some different pairings. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comment section. Until next time, against another pretty good team in the Hurricanes for the last game on this homestand before the Kraken go back on the road. Stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless, and go Kraken.